In today's WCUU broadcast, roving reporter wanders around UUville and asks citizens what they believe happens when we die.
This is WCUU, Wisdom of the Community of Unitarian Universalists, on the air. Good morning. I am Amy Anchor, and I am here to explore what happens when people die. Even as I speak, WCUU's roving and very handsome reporter is alert on the streets of UUville, choosing random citizens to ask about their beliefs. At the end of our show, we will ask our brilliant WCUU NUU's analyst whether the statements you have heard represent typical UU beliefs. Let's talk to our roving reporter now. Hey there, roving reporter. Are you there? Come in, roving reporter.
Yeah, I'm here, Anchor. This is your roving reporter, Mike In Your Face. Here's a great big smile for all you good folks out there watching me roam the streets of UUville.
So let's get at it, Mike. What have the good folk of UUville got to say about death?
Well, let's find out. Excuse me, sir, if you could, yes, thank you. Would you mind talking a minute to answer a question for our broadcast? They're all out there. Sure. What do you believe happens after we die?
Well, that big question. I was raised with certain beliefs about heaven and hell, but honestly, now I would say what happens at death is a mystery. I know that most of my neighbors in UUville have lots of different opinions about this, like they have about everything. But most of us agree that they can never really know what happens at death, at least until they die. That's okay with me because I want to concentrate on what I do know about, and that's about life. I think it's more important to focus on creating a better life for everyone here on Earth than to focus on what happens when we die.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'll let you go back about your business. There you have it, Anchor. One hot take on what happens after we die, and I'll tell you what else is happening after I get to my script. Aha. Let's see. Can we find anyone else who's willing to talk here today? Anyone who has the...
Maybe in that direction, perhaps.
Oh, Anchor, we're going to go to a remote location.
After we die? Well, even though there isn't scientific proof, I believe there is a heaven. My favorite Uncle Joe, who died last week, is there. You know that many UUs do not believe in heaven, but some do, and so do many other people around the world. I just have this feeling that I'll see Uncle Joe along with other people and dogs and cats I've lost again someday when I die.
Well, okay, thank you for your time, and I am sorry to hear about the death of your Uncle Joe. Now let us see, is there someone else around here? Anyone holding a script with, say, a 3 in it? All right, over there. Thank you for not making me wonder if I was going to get anyone else to answer my questions. So, do you have a minute to answer a question?
Sure.
All right, well, today we are asking about people's beliefs regarding death, because we like to keep it light here on WCUU. What do you believe happens after we die?
Oh, that's easy. I believe in reincarnation, that our souls are born into a different body and experience another life. I'm not sure if this goes on indefinitely or if there's an end point, like nirvana, where souls become one with the universe.
Okay, well, and say hello to the rest of the Electric Mayhem for me. All right, one with the universe. Okay, that's deep. Well, let's see if we can maybe find one more person who can share. Right, here we go. One more. Hello, I'm from WCUU, the only TV station in town. Wondering if you can answer a question for us.
What's it about?
I am asking folks in UUville what they think happens when we die.
This isn't what I believe. This is what I knew. Death is the end of life and nothing happens afterwards. You're just done. You don't exist anymore. I have a good friend who believes there's a heaven, but I don't agree. I think the way we live on is in the memories of others. I went to a UU memorial service recently, and people told wonderful stories about the person who died. Those stories will live on for years and years and years.
Roving reporter, those were fascinating reports.
That's what I'm here for.
Now, let's hear what our NUU's analyst has to say all about this. So, NUU analyst Mike, what do you think? Have we just heard typical UU views about death?
Indeed, we have, Amy. UUs do look to many sources to help them think about death and the answers to other big questions. Ultimately, though, they understand that nobody can really be sure what happens when we die, at least until we ourselves die. Most UUs do not believe in heaven with angels and clouds, but some of them do. Some believe in reincarnation. Other beliefs exist too. But most UUs agree we should worry more about how to use our lives than about what happens after death. Another belief shared by most UUs is this: people live on after death because of what they did in life, and the love they give in life is sure to survive them after death.
Oh, thank you, NUU analyst Mike. That helps a great deal. Any other wise ideas to tell us?
Sure. Here's a good way to put it. Many UUs worry more about the heavens and hells on earth than they do about any heavens and hells that come after death.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. That is very good to know. And now on to our next story. Big craft fair next weekend.
15-day trip to Egypt, where the focus was a lot of focus on the Egyptians' religious beliefs in an afterlife and how you get there and how you prepare for it. It's really complex because there's 4,000 years of history through which it's evolved. Focus has been on the pharaohs, the leaders, the royalty, the upper class, and but they're now discovering that the common man shared these same beliefs in the life after death and how you get it. But instead of sending gold and jewel grave goods with the person, they used pottery. So they had the same sorts of support they could use in the afterlife, but with more common materials. But I did find a reading that kind of describes what the Egyptians believed. It's from a website that I thought kind of did try to simplify 4,000 years of complex history with geographical variation and a lot of complexity. A fundamental religious belief held by the ancient Egyptians was that life on earth was only the first part of their journey in this world. They did not believe in death, they believed in immortality. Death was considered a transition into the afterlife or another realm of eternal paradise. Afterlife was considered a reflection of one's life on earth. Essentially, the goal was to make life on earth worth living eternally. Upon death, the ancient Egyptians believed one had to be mummified in order for his soul to return to the body and continue the eternal journey to the promised afterworld. Through mummification, the corpse would be transformed into a new body destined to live and rise again. The preservation of the corpse was vital because the ancient Egyptians believed that the soul and personality of the dead continued to live in the body even after death. Without the body, the soul no longer existed. Items such as household goods, food and drinks, on the most basic level, these items are much more abundant and lavish the higher one's social and economic status is, were placed on offering tables near the tomb. They believed that the person would need these items in the afterworld. The ritual of preparing the dead for the journey was quite elaborate. It involved purification, the burning of incense, holy incantations, and lastly, touching the mummified body with a variety of ritual objects to restore the five senses. The journey to the afterlife was thought to be arduous, tumultuous, and full of dangers. Once the deceased pass through the underworld, they arrive at the land of the gods. They would then pass through 7 gates, reciting a spell at each gate. If they are successful and recite the verses correctly, they will arrive at the Hall of Osiris and prepare for the judgment. And in the several tombs that I toured, you could see the pharaoh would be journeying through this afterlife, this sort of middle underworld in a boat. And he couldn't really get through it without magic. It was, he had to have no magic spells, and there were numerous books with the incantations and calling upon the gods to help him make it through. Osiris was the judge and lord of the dead in the underworld. The gods of the dead performed the weighing of the heart ceremony to assess if a person lived a virtuous and just life on earth. The confessions of the deceased would be listened to by a total of 42 different gods known as the divine judges. The Book of the Dead provided them with proper words to say to each one of the judges. This would help the person pass even if they were not completely innocent. After the confessions, the heart would be weighed on a scale. On one side of the scale would be a feather that embodied Mat, the goddess of harmony, justice, and truth. If the heart weighed the same as the feather, this meant the person lived a just life and respected the divine and human social order on earth. Then they would achieve immortality and pass on to the afterlife eternally. If their balance was not equal, the person would be considered guilty and his heart devoured by the demoness Ammit. Her body was part lion, hippopotamus, and crocodile, a truly terrifying and grotesque entity. This meant that the person would not survive in the afterlife and his life would end in shame and torment. After passing all these challenges and tests, one would finally make it to the blessed afterworld. The soul would cross over the waters to the field of reeds. Here they would find family members and loved ones that had already passed there before, as well as other cherished animals they had lost. This paradise was where one could enjoy an eternal life full of one's loved ones and cherished possessions. All of this with the immediate presence of the holy gods. This realm was a reflection of the real world, with blue skies, rivers, boats, gods and goddesses to worship, and fields and crops. The afterlife was seen as the perfect paradise because the soul is reunited with everything they lost in the moral world. The ancient Egyptians had one of the most comforting and relaxing afterlives ever imagined.
As Lori mentioned, she just returned from that trip to Egypt. We have Anna in Egypt now. I don't know what's going on. And found just these beliefs and rituals around death absolutely fascinating. When we were discussing the topic, she talked about walking down hallways that were lined with mummies, and how even though she's planning on getting cremated, there was something about these human forms that were really powerful to her and somewhat resonated in a way. I love it when we're caught by surprise and wonder. It helps us learn more about ourselves and the world, and it keeps us flexible and humble in our thoughts and feelings. As Lori read that piece on ancient Egyptians, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sort of the kindness and comfort in the way that the living prepared their dead for the afterlife. Sure, there was a threat of an equivalent of hell and a lot of testing, it appeared. But there was also the possibility of living one's life in an afterlife with people and pets and land and loved ones. When I was taught about Unitarian Universalist, I heard the easy phrase to remember that we are more about the journey than about the destination. That heaven and hell just simply isn't something that we have on our daily minds. Reverend Clay Nelson tells of asking Google, can a Unitarian go to heaven? He said he got some interesting responses. All of them were no. And then he said one response was no. On the road to the afterlife, there is a fork in the road. The left path has a sign to heaven, and the right has a sign to a discussion about heaven. Without pausing, Unitarians always turned right. I think heaven and hell have a bad rap when it comes to contemporary Unitarian Universalists. Our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors, which were separate strands until the 1960s, they opposed the fire and brimstone theology that some of you were actually raised in. Universalism's central belief denied the predominant doctrines of heaven and hell through their belief in universal salvation. All people of all faiths and all nations would ultimately end up in heaven. Some Universalists, known as ultra-Universalists, led by a man named Hosea Ballou, they believe that we create our own heaven and hell on earth, so there's absolutely no need for more eternal punishment. All will be saved and go to heaven, no questions asked. And then there was another group of Universalists who broke away from that a little bit. They believed that people would eventually go to heaven, but there was some restitution that had to take place before so that they could restore themselves to a state of grace and be able to actually go to heaven. The 1803 Winchester Profession of the which was a Universalist creed, the Universalist Church on DuPont, actually, they would use this Winchester Profession. It stated, "We believe that there is one God whose nature is love, revealed in the one Lord Jesus Christ, who will finally restore the whole family of mankind to holiness and happiness." Unitarians focused on their view of a benevolent God. A statement by a Unitarian minister, Henry Giles, in 1839 puts it clearly. There's no room in the same universe for a good God and eternal hell. The difference between Unitarian and Universalist could be summed up in Unitarians believe God was too good to condemn us, and Universalists believe we were too good to be condemned. We are a people who, in the new language of Article 2, which describes our inspirations, draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings. For some, the mere idea of heaven is nothing more than human denial of the finite nature of our lives on earth, a life which has limits and an ultimate end. These limits, the reality of our own deaths, inspire us to focus on making this life what it can be and aspiring to leave a meaningful legacy. You heard some of that in the play today. I think it's important to note that this is somewhat of a privileged theological stance. A theology of a life beyond this one has been central in the life of those who have suffered and been oppressed across time. The thought of a slave master going to heaven would literally be an affront to one who was enslaved or one who is enslaved. The temporary nature of this world is a theology that brings hope and peace to many who are coming from a position where power and privilege in this world is not even remotely accessible to them. So I think it's wise for us to be cautious when condemning worldviews around heaven and hell, particularly when we're really thinking about the broader society. But in truth, how are we to know anything for sure? Shakespeare has Hamlet saying this of death: "The undiscovered country from where the born no traveler returns." As my colleague Marlon Lavenher says, death is a complete mystery that nobody knows. There's only one way to find out. I'll never forget, though, when Marlon preached at Unity Church Unitarian. Marlon's daughter, Sienna, died 3 days after her 3rd birthday. And Marlon shares that he's not sure if he believes in heaven, but when he's sitting beside a congregant, every time he says, when you cross over, if you see Sienna, will you give her a hug for me and tell her that me and her mom and her brother love her? He confesses he doesn't know if there's a heaven, but he sure isn't going to miss a chance to send a message to her. So today we get some time to sort of think about, what do we think of all of this? What has stirred our curiosity, or how do we articulate our own thoughts about what happens after we die? Have you had experiences which have caused you to pause, like Lori's in Egypt? Have your beliefs changed over time? For this to be a safe place, I just want us to make sure that we're using I statements, and so that we're not like putting down other people's beliefs as we're sharing. And I really do want to open it up to us to talk, because we don't get a chance to talk about this often. And I know it's something that congregants talk to me often about, are curious about. So it's a strange thing why we don't even chat about it more often. So we've got Chad in the back with a microphone. You can raise your hand, or you can raise your hand online. And I just would love to hear, what are some of your thoughts? Have things changed? How do you live with this? If you don't know how, just any reflections. I see Polly over here.
Thanks, Chad. I've always believed that when I die, I'm dead, and I fertilize the ground. And but with Kathleen's dying, there's this little sparkle of, what if I can find her again? And then cardinals, female cardinals. I have this belief that when I see a female cardinal, it's my Kathleen saying hi, and I talk to them. And I consider it a gift. So if that ain't confusing, I don't know what is.
Confusing is just fine.
It's beautiful. Will you introduce yourself before
Sure.
you talk?
I'm Kevin, he, him. In the late 80s, early 90s, I was a case manager for people with AIDS, and so I was at the side of people when they died frequently. Profound experiences. But I was also walking into my mother's hospital room one time when she had a very severe illness, and she was speaking to my eldest brother. And she said she saw the light. And she was going towards the light, but all of a sudden there were 2 lights. And she was so confused, she came back. And I always wonder, my mother's mother died in her childbirth. And the man who adopted her, against the opposition of his wife, she adored. There were other people who had gone before her, and I'm wondering if more than one person was calling out to her, but she couldn't decide. Just a profound mystery that always stays with me.
Thank you, Kevin. Linda, will you keep your eye out online, because you can just tell us if you see anybody?
Bruce, he, him. When my mother died, she was struggling, she was fighting. And we knew that it was very close to the end. But she was fighting death. So when this was the last time I saw her, her husband went by the name Vanny. That's what she called him, my Vanny. So last time I saw her, I said, Mom, Vanny's waiting for you. He's waiting for you. It's okay, it's time. As we were driving home, actually when we got home, we heard that she passed away about 20 minutes after we left. For her, the comfort of seeing Vanny, of having a heaven, makes me wonder, what is what do people need and what is there? Do we just become atoms and exist through being atoms in the universe? I don't know. Mystery.
I'm Jamie, she, her. I believe we do have a soul. I don't know much about it, how to access it, but although probably it does come at certain times when you're feeling spiritual. And I think that our souls exist beyond this life in some realm that we don't fully understand it. I don't think it's heaven, but there.
Thank you, Jamie.
Marie, she, her. I grew up in what I realized was a mixed family. My dad was Lutheran, and my mom went to a Bible church, which of course is a fundamentalist church, but she was pretty cool. She didn't focus on the hell part of it at all. But hearing in Sunday school a lot about hell, and then when I started going to services, being a feeling sort of person, I took that to heart, and I was terrified of hell. It's taken a long time to really get out of that. I now believe that there is a soul, but I see it as energy, because energy is in the whole universe. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I'm a little bummed about time because I see it's a little later than I hoped. We are going to have a 15-minute break, and Lori brought a ton of treats back there. So I'm hoping that perhaps on a more private level, you might converse with one another and give each other space to share your thoughts. I find it a very sacred and tender and sometimes vulnerable conversation about what we believe. So I hope that you will take that opportunity.